Total War Warhammer is an RTS that I probably don't even have to explain to you because of how popular this series is, but I'll do it anyway. Essentially, you get real-time combat mixed with turn-based army and city management on a map. This is a very long-running series that's very popular and very well-liked, with the exception, I think, of Total War Rome 2. Total War Warhammer is certainly something a lot of work went into, but is it worth the $60 they're asking you? Let's start with the gameplay. The gameplay here is just as any other Total War has it. Let's start with the battles first in specific. In the battles, you micromanage up to like 40 different units, which is not the easiest task. And you try to use terrain, unit type, and attack direction to gain the advantage and defeat your enemies. Total War Warhammer changed how this works a bit though. It opted for a simpler version of the combat with a lot less strategy and a lot more rock, paper, scissors. For the first time in a Total War game, you can win with sheer numbers alone. And any attempts at strategy are basically non-existent because they're not necessary. That makes this game much easier to play and more accessible to a casual audience, but it also kind of ruins the fun that battles used to give in this series. Sieges, for example, don't work anything like they used to. Now if you attack a town, you fight outside of it, unless some sort of defense building gets set up. And when a defense is set up, then you just fight auto-firing turrets and break through the walls to actually fight the enemy army that's just sitting inside of it. All the tactics of defending a wall and fighting for them and defending certain parts of your city no longer really exist. Every single aspect of the gameplay here has been simplified, and after you get your fill of it, you'll find the auto-resolve button becomes your best friend. The second part of the gameplay, and where most of your time will be spent, will be on the world map. Here you get to do a lot of things. You can manage your cities and towns, which in this game are linked to an extent. You need to control a city to effectively control a region, which is made up of a city and some smaller towns. Cities can get more and better upgrades, whereas towns are more limited and need to be specialized to fulfilling a certain role. It's decent customization. It's about the same as any other Total War game, which I suppose is a good thing, seeing as this is something that did not get simplified like the combat. There are, of course, certain buildings linked to certain regions and resources, and acquiring resources also still plays a big part in the game. They did expand how movement in the world map works a little by adding things like the ability to travel underground for the dwarves. It doesn't actually show you the underground unless you get into a battle while in the travel underground mode, but it does add some well-needed variance to the turns of the game that I don't recall being in any of the older ones that I have played. The reason you will spend so much of your time on this mode, however, is because of how often you're going to end up relying on auto-resolve. If you have even a slight advantage, it seems to resolve more in your favor than actually fighting the battle would do. The only reason to actually fight a battle is if it's exactly even or if you have a slight disadvantage. The game plays out very differently then than it would if you auto-resolved. The diplomacy in this game is interesting. It is as nonsensical as it ever has been in a Total War game though. Random offers come in all the time. Factions don't do things as you'd expect them to. For example, someone far away from you will declare war on you even if they can't reach you. They'll also then immediately surrender and give you gold to make peace with them. Don't rely on diplomacy with any AI that are not the same race as you. There are modifiers to make it so that essentially, for the most part, only your own race can like you. Almost every other race will naturally be your enemy or occasionally be neutral. It means diplomacy doesn't really play that big a part in this game. Is that a good thing? Well, I personally don't like it, but it admittedly fits in with the Warhammer theme, so I can't really fault this system for not being diplomatically friendly. But let me tell you, I never thought I'd see vampires start 3 wars with me and pay to close all of them when we could never even reach each other. That was quite the experience. I mean, I'll take the gold, but like, why? Every faction, or at least almost every faction, has something unique about it too that helps diversify the gameplay and make playing every faction a different experience. For example, dwarves get the Great Book of Grudges, where whenever someone wrongs you, you have to get revenge. Success will result in reward, but leaving it up there will result in a penalty for as long as you don't do it, and it will never go away until the grudge is settled. Vampires and chaos can corrupt the lands around them and give themselves bonuses and everyone else penalties. Orcs can go into the wog. Chaos doesn't even get cities. That they can't conquer things, they can't rule them. Pretty much every playable faction has some unique feature which I find really important, and I'm glad they added, as it certainly wasn't in the last few Total Wars I played. And of course, you have options. You can play the world campaign I've spoken so much about, or you can just play skirmish battles or even multiplayer. The campaign has co-op mode as well, though including someone in there usually results in a lot of auto-resolving or sharing your own troops, unless you constantly move your own armies around together. That can kind of defeat the purpose at some point, but there's no other logical way they could implement co-op that I can think of due to how the game modes work. The game's campaign mode, however, does get hurt from what I call a bit of Total War syndrome. The turns, as you go on, get longer and longer and longer. Looking over some of my gameplay videos, I see that I only got in one actual battle within an hour and a half, and only several turns actually went by. Now that's not to say it's a bad thing they give you so much to do, but it really makes mid to late games start to get extremely boring. The more cities you get, the more you have to manage every turn. The more armies you get, the more you have to move and recruit and use in battles every turn. And this game has a huge map, which I like, but it makes the monotonous gameplay of the world map stretch out so long that you'll start manually doing every single battle, even ones you're better off auto-resolving, just because you'll barely ever get any real ones in comparison to how much time you spend on the world map. It becomes so boring, and when played cooperatively, that problem doubles. Now, the production of the game goes like this. The voice acting is fucking fantastic. While there's no story to speak of, simply the sounds of your troops charging and yelling in battle are amazing to listen to, and add the gritty feeling to the audio that any real Warhammer game needs. The graphics aren't the best, but they'll age well, I think, as they picked a more cartoony look to the game than striving for any realistic look or feeling, or if they did, then they just failed so horribly it looks cartoony. But either way, they're certainly nice to look at, but that's only if you can actually run them. The optimization here isn't very good. While my PC can chug out 60 frames per second on max settings, and it's nearly top of the line, mind you, most other PCs won't have any luck, and I found no difference in performance between AMD and Nvidia setups. So be ready to sacrifice some graphical fidelity if you're not running at least a 1070 and a 6700K like I am. Now, here's where my biggest gripe when it comes to the idea of recommending Total War Warhammer comes in. This game is marketed like shit. The game basically removed blood and sold it back to us for $3. I don't know why they think selling something separately that is expected in a Total War Warhammer game is okay, but they do. They also made an entire base faction unplayable unless you pre-ordered or paid them $8. $8 just to play Chaos. Sure, it's a very different style of gameplay, but $8 for something that was included in the base game? I can't even begin to comprehend that. Now, to their credit, they did provide a lot of free DLC, including an entire faction made playable, and plenty of new units. However, here's probably the best one of all of these that I somewhat mentioned in the beginning. They have released Total War Warhammer 2, and this game is still $60. I don't even think Activision does anything that bad. They might, but when I played Activision games, they certainly didn't. So not only are they selling you content that was base for a total of $11 on top, they're also charging you $60 still after the sequel is released. There's plenty of other DLC too, but take into account if you want to play everything that was base, that was included in the base game, including the blood effects, you're going to be paying $71. This is a video game. $71. So, overall, my rating with this game and what I think about it has fumbled all over the place. I got a solid 18 hours out of this before the problems mentioned within this review really got to me and I just kind of gave up. 18 hours across different factions, skirmish battles, and some multiplayer. With the base price tag, that's over $3 an hour. When purchasing all the base content, that's $4 an hour. For most games, that's an incredibly horrific price, but that's not because the content to support more isn't here, it's because the content mostly amounts to these long turns or repetitive battles. With the huge lack of strategy in this Total War, the battles themselves become very repetitive if you try to find your fun in those. There's no real tactics. Tactics will moreover hurt you than help you in most cases. So I give Total War Warhammer a 6 out of 10. It was certainly above average, and it was fun for a while, but I got nowhere close to even half finishing one of the 3 campaigns I started, not even on a short victory. And when the battles themselves are so simplistic, then what fun can really be found in different scenarios of those? I'm gonna have to say you should avoid buying this, or at least wait for an extreme sale, like 75% off at least. You're not getting enough fun given how much money they want for this game. It's not a bad game, it's just not as good as any other Total War game that has defined the franchise. And so I hope you found this review helpful. If you want to see more just like it, then make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you on the next Res Reviews.